You're listening to KZUM News on 89.3 KZUM Lincoln and KZUM HD. Good afternoon and welcome to today's edition of KZUM News, an hour dedicated to learning more about what is going on in Lincoln and the surrounding areas. I am the news director and your host, Amantha Dickman.
My name is Rebecca Ford, KZUM's news intern, and I will be your co-host for this episode.
And before we get into today's episode, I just want to say a few words about our fund drive. This is May, which means we are celebrating Give to Lincoln throughout the entire month of May and working on our goal to raise $55,000. We're going to keep it short and sweet this afternoon, and I'm just going to remind you that if you have anything you can spare, we are always so grateful for the support of our community. So, if you're looking to help support us, it is super easy. You can head to kzum.org, and there will be a giant red donate button at the top right-hand corner of the screen, which will take you to a secure payment portal. You can check out there. They will send you a receipt when you are done, and you will have helped us gotten one step closer to that goal of $55,000. And of course, I also want to thank everyone who has donated. Like I said, we have come a long way since beginning our fund drive. And even though we've got quite a ways to go, we wouldn't be where we are without the support of our listeners. So thanks to everyone who's donated and supported our station this month and all year long, of course. And with that being said, Tuesday, May 6th was the general election for the city of Lincoln. While ballots continue to be counted, the Lancaster County Election Commission released its projected results for the election at 10 p.m. that evening. With 3 open seats on the Lincoln City Council, incumbents Benny Shobe, Tom Beckius, and Sandra J. Washington were all re-elected. The Board of Education District 1 seat has gone to John Goodwin. The Board of Education District 3 seat has gone to incumbent Barbara Beyer. The Board of Education District 5 seat has gone to Mara Krivolavec, and the Board of Education District 7 seat has gone to Marilyn Johnson Farr. The amending of the Lincoln Municipal Code, which we will learn more about next week, also passed. But this afternoon, I'm turning the mic over to news intern Rebecca Ford as she sits down with the incumbent Vanessa Emlich, who was re-elected to serve her second term on the Airport Authority Board of Directors.
The general election that occurred on Tuesday, May 6th, involved the election of candidates to a variety of positions. A seat on the Lincoln Airport Authority Board of Directors was one such seat made open as incumbent Vanessa Emlich ended her term. Emlich ran in the general election for her second term and was re-elected to the board. We sat down with her to discuss her goals, priorities, and her reflections going into her second term. First off, I want to ask, you're now running for your second term with the Airport Authority. Can you tell me a little bit about what the position of being on the Airport Authority entails, and just a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'm running actually for my first full term. I was appointed midway through a former board member's term, and so I was appointed a year and a half ago. So I'm running now for a full term. So the Lincoln Airport Authority Board is really responsible for overseeing all the operations related to the airport. That's including, the commercial air service, the grounds that the airport is responsible for, and all of the operations related.
Gotcha. Thank you for explaining that a little bit.
Yeah.
With this being your, so like you said, you were appointed to this position last time. Now you're running for election. What's motivating you to be running for election this time?
Well, I want to continue what we've started over the last year and a half. We've been working as a board together to make sure that we're outlining some short and long-term plans. We created our first ever airport strategic plan. And so we outlined some goals, our mission, our vision. And so we've already started working on those goals, like adding commercial air service, increasing our seat capacity for commercial air service, maximizing the use of our industrial park, supporting our general aviation and our military partners, and just our overall critical infrastructure for the airport. So we've been working on all of those things, but just sort of having those as sort of a formalized document and ways to track our progress has been really important. So we actually just approved that strategic plan on Monday.
Oh, wow.
And so it's been about 15 months in the making. So it's very nice to actually see a finalized product. So
For sure,
yeah,
it's super interesting. And so that sounds like
yeah.
that's the big motivator behind running for the second term to carry that plan out.
Carry that plan out and you know, I've been on the air service committee as well as the marketing committee. And so along with Nikki Beamer Pop, who's part of the both of those committees as well, we've been working with the airport team, Rachel Barth and Dave Herring to and our air service consultant to address that air service piece. And so we've made a lot of progress there, and I want to make sure that we're actually, you know, seeing some positive results from that effort. So,
Mm-hmm. Totally understandable. Can you tell me a little bit about the term that you're ending and what you've been doing with that? Of course, like you said, the strategic plan has been in the making. What were some other
mhm.
things that have been priorities for you?
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm on the air service committee. So, there's been a few pieces to that. Um, Identifying our overall air service recruitment strategy has been a big part of that. Coming in, we were coming into the board around the time that a previous air service consultant was there. We had to hire a new one. So finding the right air service consultant for us, evaluating, you know, what made sense and how do we target new airlines and routes that make sense for Lincoln, and using that assistance from the air service consultant that we hired. Also, making sure that we are getting the community stakeholder input. So part of that is we established an air service advisory council that includes multiple community stakeholders from the business industry or business world, the university, the chamber, just to make sure that we have insights on not only what we see as important, but what the community sees as important for commercial air service. And then also evaluating from there, what is our strategy? How are we pitching airlines? Making sure that we're making ourselves stand out from other airports as we're going to, you know, present ourselves at industry conferences. Nikki and I went to an air service conference last year just to see how it worked, participated in some meetings with airlines, and got to see firsthand what it's like to try to interact with airlines. And it's quite a process. It's not just a sort of one and done meeting. You have, you know, the presentation, you're showing the data, what can Lincoln support? Here's all the information to show that, but also here's what Lincoln has to offer, being the official airport of the Husker Athletics, and having this community support behind us, but also building those relationships on an ongoing basis. And that's where, you know, Rachel and Dave come in. They are having ongoing meetings along with their air service consultant. They're doing that work to maintain those relationships, have those discussions, making sure that we are partnering with the right airline that makes sense for us as a city. So
Great. I want to kind of ask you a little bit more about, you had a lot of points there that I want to get back to later in this conversation.
sure.
But I want to return more to your background.
Okay.
Having worked in airlines before, can you tell me a little bit more about where your airline, airport, aviation experience started, and how you've got to this point?
Sure. I worked for Lufthansa Airlines, which is an international German airline, or it's a German airline that flies internationally. But I was a customer service representative quite a while back. It wasn't a very long time with the airline, but it did provide with me a sense of understanding about the industry. I've always had sort of a deep love for travel, but
Mm.
it also kind of gave me the practical information to understand the airline industry and to kind of carry on from there. So sort of informally throughout my life, I've monitored airline trends. I've kept in kept aware of what was going on with the industry. I'm constantly monitoring newsletters as well as news and tracking essentially what routes are being set up where and just understanding like what are some of the airlines their strategies for expanding and so it's just been sort of a long process of planting the seed early on with my experience at the airline, but then carrying on sort of informally through research throughout the rest of my life. And then, as I came onto the airport board a year and a half ago, I was able to really kind of refine and use all of that information as we're going forward working with our consultant and our my fellow board members. So,
It's super interesting. It's kind of starting at the bottom there and then working your
yeah,
way up.
right. Yeah,
Super
exactly.
cool. Yeah, well, now I want to go back to you were speaking a little bit about community and getting community
Mhm.
input, talking about an advisory board. That sounds like it kind of aligns with one of your goals, which is to focus on sustainability and transparency. Can you
Right.
discuss a little bit more about what sustainability and transparency looks like to you and how you hope to implement that?
I think for sustainability, we're making sure that when you're looking at any opportunity, particularly any business opportunity, that it makes sense to invest your time and energy in something that is going to have the long-term impact that you're expecting. And that's where the strategic plan comes into play and having our set mission and our set vision to say, what do we want out of the city? And we want to see we want to see the Lincoln Airport be an innovative transportation and business hub. And if we want to see that, then we need to partner with the right airlines who looking at their history of where have they sustained um, specific routes in other cities with other airports and do they have a history of staying in a city, investing in a city? Do they have uh, are they successful as an airline, making sure that that their profitability is going to be sustained over the next few years. And so when we're talking about sustainability, we want to make sure that if we partner with an airline, that over the next few years, that they're going to stick around, but also that we're able to fill the seats for those flights. And that's where the data comes into play when we're looking at feasibility and seeing that, as Lincoln residents are, maybe going to other airports like Omaha or Kansas City, and they're traveling to certain destinations, does the data support that if we were to have our own flight to one of those destinations, are we able to fill those seats in the long term? So it's kind of a combination of, is the airline a good long-term partner? Are we able to fill those seats based off of the data that we're seeing? And is this a good fit in the long run and align with our overall mission and vision?
Hmm.
So,
Right, yeah, it sounds like there's a lot that goes into it, not just so much there's a high demand, there's a lot more that goes into that than just demand.
right, right, exactly.
Hmm. Well, thank you for touching on that.
Mhm.
I want to ask a little more about how your previous experience is informing um, your running for election this time. Have your goals shifted at all, or is it just moving forward with some of your same priorities?
I think moving forward with a lot of the same priorities, it's being on the board for a year and a half. Haven't really had the opportunity to, see some of those initial projects seen through completely. We've seen some successes, but being able to say, here's a new airline that we've been able to bring into the city, that I really want to see that happen. That's obviously that's our number one goal in our strategic plan is to bring a new one new mainline carrier as well as one new leisure carrier to Lincoln within the next 5 years. And so to actually see that happen is important to me. So it's not so much a um, different goals from, the first time I ran to this time. It's just more of a continuation of some of the same goals, but having some real, um, I don't know how to describe it, having some real progress on those goals already, and seeing them through completely. So not just starting at the beginning, it's actually somewhere in the middle where we are able to finish those out.
Hmm. And touching on some of those goals, you've kind of mentioned things relevant to what I'm about to ask you here and there.
Okay.
But I'm just interested, what do you think are the biggest areas for improvement going forward with the Lincoln Airport?
I think there's been so much going on at the airport. I think one of the things we're working on doing is having additional communication and transparency with the community. So one of the things that we're going to be doing in June is having a town hall where the public is welcome to come to the airport. All board members will be there. We're going to be doing a presentation and talking about our strategic plan, our plan for air service, and some of the other projects that we're working on, and kind of give some updates, but also give plenty of time to the community to talk to us about, what they want to see out of the airport or their concerns. All of our meetings are obviously public meetings. People can come and attend if they want to, but those are throughout the day. And sometimes it's harder for people to go to those if they work during the day. So this is going to be 5 o'clock, I think on June 3rd. I don't want to get that date wrong, but I'm sure that we'll publicize that. It'll be at the beginning of June, and just the opportunity for people to come out and talk to us. So I think that's one thing for us that we want to make sure that we're doing is sharing the information about what we are working on so that the public is aware and we can get that input.
Do you see the town hall, do you see that being sort of just a one-off thing, or do you see that maybe
No,
happening continually?
I see that happening continually, and even if it's not just in a town hall setting, having that information somewhere available. I know we've talked about possibly using our website as a forum to offer at least the information and the updates. People can log in to or not log in, but go to our website and see any of our meeting minutes and see information on like what we've talked about during those meetings. But to be able to interact with us is probably something that's not been available before outside of our public meeting forum. So we've talked about using our website as another medium potentially to do that. So um, I expect that to be an ongoing.
Interesting. Yeah. Do you think this is kind of sort of a broad question that might be a little bit difficult to answer?
Sure.
Um, but what do you think the public might be most interested in knowing regarding the development of Lincoln Airport or anything airport authority related?
I think that I've been doing a lot of conversations, having a lot of conversations with people as I've been canvassing and just at community events. And every question has always been about when are you getting more air service? I think that's the number one question. And of course, that is going to be probably one of the top questions. I imagine another question is probably related to our plans for the tax levy as well. I know that that is of interest to the community, and as well it should be because it is, of course, public money that is being spent to support the airport. So we want to make sure that we are addressing those questions, sharing what exactly that money is going towards, and show that we're being transparent and we're investing those funds in a fiscally responsible way with the intent of having those savings pay off in the long run so that we don't have to use the tax levy in the future.
So is the tax levy something that's currently happening, or is that something that has the potential to go forward?
It it was passed last summer, so that is something that is happening now.
Mhm.
It is possible that it will continue. So that is something that's already taking place.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that for
Yeah,
me.
no problem.
Um, Next, I want to ask more about some of your goals. You describe on your campaign website that you hope to drive growth, foster innovation, and improve efficiency. Um,
hmm
Moving forward, what does doing those things look like to you?
I think any opportunity, I think there's a few different ways that you can do that. And I think having s- collaborative partnerships within the community, as well as using technology for innovation is hugely important, especially when you're looking at driving growth with regard to business as well as industry and air service. The air service industry is so heavily driven on data. The route planners for airlines are looking at where people are traveling, what does the revenue look like, how, what is the best investment for the airline based off of the numbers. And so for us to really be truly competitive and smart with how we're targeting airlines, we need to make sure that we are also equally able to analyze the data ourselves or through our air service consultant, which is has been the air service consultant that we've been working with is hugely data driven. And so being able to represent ourselves in a way that speaks the language of those route planners is critical. Um, and then likewise, when we're looking at, as far as, growing an industry or business planning, being able to have people who understand those industries. We're engaging with a broker for our industrial park to help us look at better leasing strategies, assessing our fair market value and making sure that we're being competitive in comparison to similar markets to make sure that we are bringing in the revenue that our industrial park deserves, essentially. So there are a few different ways that we can partner with the right entities and use the technology to make sure that we are, as an airport, doing all that we can to bring in that revenue and industry and air service.
I'd love to hear more about the development of the industrial park. I see that
Sure.
you're hoping to continue to support existing tenants, attract new industry, create business opportunity. Can you discuss a little bit more about your plans for those things?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we engaged with a broker who's going to help us to evaluate, first of all, do an inventory of what all do we have available in the industrial park. Do we have buildings or land that could, be available for development? As an airport, we're a little bit unique in that, we can't necessarily sell off the land, but we can, encourage development, bring in additional industry. Timty is an example, a company that came in last year and built a large facility on the airport grounds. And so being able to identify opportunities like that where a company might be looking to build a larger facility, even though they might not be able to own that ground, the opportunity is beneficial to them as well as us. So that broker, along with partnering with the chamber, is helpful to us to identify the right targets as we're looking to expand out there.
For sure. Well, I just want to kind of switch gears for right now and discuss the Redway airline um, stuff that happened.
Sure.
Um, Coming out of that first term, was that was that ending the board member before you, or was that coming into your term? How did you manage that situation, and what were some takeaways?
So I was not a part of the board yet when Redway was there. And actually, I think maybe the day after I I can't remember if it was the day before or the day after it was announced that I was being appointed to the board, that I find out that Redway was ending. And so, so I wasn't really part of the project itself, but I was part of the evaluating
Mhm.
the next steps afterwards. So Redway ended. Obviously, the project didn't work out, and so it was an opportunity for us to look at where were some of the areas that we could learn going forward, that learn from essentially going forward. So takeaways. We evaluated the audit that the state auditor's office did on the whole project, which was extremely thorough. And reading through that, doing some takeaways. Me being in the audit field myself, it was highly beneficial to see, what recommendations were made, and going forward, looking as well as somebody who wasn't involved in the project itself, being able to step back and say, maybe here are some takeaways on what we can do going forward. Working with the rest of the board members and the airport staff, it was a collaborative time to look at. So that's, from that, we did form the Air Service Advisory Council as a result of the Redway project closing, because we wanted to get that community stakeholder feedback anytime we're evaluating an air service opportunity, because we could look at an air service opportunity as a board, but not really necessarily have that feedback from external parties. And we have to be careful about, who we discuss potential opportunities with, because as you're negotiating with an airline, you're not really able to share that until that you have a firm contract in hand, and the airline is ready to announce. And so having that council, who has signed a non-disclosure agreement, we can talk to them about those opportunities and say, does this make sense for you? To you, what is your opinion on this, and get their feedback before we discuss as an entire board. So that's just one element. Again, a lot of what I mentioned before also came out of that, hiring the new air service consultant, making sure that we're taking an approach where we're looking for the long-term partner. We don't want to partner with an airline necessarily that's going to, come in for a short period of time and then leave. We want to make sure that we're bringing in a partner that is going to stick around, and offer value for our residents. So,
Right. Yeah, I appreciate you clearing up that timeline for me.
yeah,
Um, and it's amazing that there was growth there, and having this council form out of that, really positive, and I think really sets up a lot of room moving forward for opportunity.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
hmm Sort of wrapping up here, I have just kind of a fun little question I want to ask. What is it that
Okay.
you love about Lincoln, or
No.
the airport, or aviation? Anything? What do you love about this community?
Yeah, that's a great question. I, I'm gonna answer two, that because you kind of asked two questions. I'm
Yes.
gonna answer. So for
Go
what I love about Lincoln is that I'm not from Lincoln originally. I grew up in Colorado and California, moved to Nebraska about 20 years ago, and then Lincoln about, I'd say, 13 years ago. What I love about Lincoln is that you can come here and not be from Lincoln or from Nebraska and feel incredibly at home. The people here are amazing. People, people are supportive of each other. They believe in community, and make sure that that they are doing whatever they can for their neighbor. So I truly appreciate that. And I've seen that as I've been canvassing and just talking to people door to door. It's nice that people actually answer the door and talk to me. So that's nice. And that kind of goes along with what I love about the airport is that, and in fact, I just posted something about this today on my social media that when you come back to the airport, when you're flying back in, you feel like you're coming home. And it's and especially since the new terminal renovation, it's the terminal is beautiful. It's sparkly, it's clean, and it just feels welcoming. And so when you walk in, you can walk down through the terminal, down the escalator, get your bag, go out the door, and you're home in 10 minutes. So that to me just makes it feel like at the end of a long journey, you can just feel at home right away when you walk into the terminal. So that's what I love about the airport and Lincoln itself. So
I'm sure that this kind of work has to come from a place of a lot of passion and involvement. So I think I think that's fantastic. I have yet to see the Lincoln Airport for the first time, but I will very soon.
oh
So I'm very excited.
yeah, highly recommend going out there, even if you're not traveling somewhere, just going out and checking it out. It's if you were there before the renovation, it's completely different to see
Ooh,
it now. So
okay. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me. I just want to give you this final opportunity if you have anything you'd like to say about yourself or your campaign or the airport or anything like that. Just any final thoughts you have.
yeah, well, I appreciate chatting with you about the airport. I would just encourage people to get out and vote on Tuesday, May 6th. Supporting local elections is hugely important. We have the city council, the Lincoln Public Schools, as well as the airport authority race, and participating in the local government elections gives you a lot of opportunity to make your voice heard. I would ask for your vote on May 6th. I have over 20 years of combined experience in leadership, strategic planning, compliance, and working with teams to make sure that we're doing following a data-driven, business-minded strategy to bring new air service to Lincoln, and doing all that we can to support industry growth and overall success for Lincoln as a whole. So I appreciate you listening.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Vanessa. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
We just finished speaking with Vanessa Emlich, a member of the Lincoln Airport Authority Board of Directors, discussing her policies and plans as she heads into her second term on the board. We're now heading into our mid-hour break. When we return, we'll dive into the Lincoln on the Move quarter-cent tax initiative that was passed during the primaries. We'll be right back.
And welcome back to today's episode of KZUM News. My name is Amantha Dickman, and I am your host for the second half of today's show. During the primary election on April 8th, city residents voted on whether or not to continue the quarter-cent tax, which would help provide funds to the Lincoln on the Move project, which includes repairs and revitalizations of our city streets. This afternoon, Lincoln Transportation and Utilities Director Liz Elliott is joining us to talk more about what voters can expect to see over the next few years since the quarter-cent tax passed. So, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to sit down with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invite. I'm happy to always talk about LTU and the great work that we're doing. So thank you.
Well, we really appreciate it. I know our listeners always have questions about how our city government works and what they're doing with their time and their projects. They want to know what to expect, especially with something as important as our roads and our utilities here across the city. So jumping in, 2019, you kind of got the ball rolling on the Lincoln on the Move project. And more recently, we've seen that April 8th primary election gave us a continuance of that quarter-cent sales tax. So, jumping into it, can you talk a little bit about in the years leading up to 2019, how you were, what needs in the city you were identifying that kind of inspired the project?
Absolutely. So, if you've been in Lincoln for any length of time, you know that the city of Lincoln is growing at a very rapid pace, which means more streets, more water, more wastewater, and with the cities growing, all of those needs continue to grow. They not only need to be built, but they also have to be maintained. So in 2018, a group of community leaders, residents, and business leaders got together to really focus on streets and where does our services fall? What are other peer cities like Iowa City or Madison, those that we often think of as we go into any sports season? And just how do we compare where are we at versus current resources and what we really need to maintain the system? That group, they identified that it takes about there's a $33 million gap in funding from what we have and resources versus what we should have to maintain the growing city needs. And they determined at that point that Lincoln on the Move would be something they wanted to support and try to help bridge that gap. So in 2019, the voters approved a quarter-cent sales tax that we call Lincoln on the Move. And that quarter-cent sales tax helped reduce that gap from that $33 million annually. It reduced it by $18 million, which is what Lincoln on the Move has brought in on average for the last 6 years.
And of course, for folks who are unfamiliar with the inner workings of sales taxes and how the city kind of operates those, can you talk about how that functions, who contributes, and how that money gets applied to these goals that you have within the Lincoln on the Move project?
A sales tax is different than other different types of fees or taxes that we all pay. A sales tax is anytime anyone's purchasing goods. It could be a new pair of shoes. It could be, anything that we're thinking of in town. You contribute to this quarter-cent sales tax. So it's not just people who live in Lincoln. It's about 30% of sales tax revenue is actually brought in by out-of-town visitors when they come here to visit family, attend a football game. Any of those activities can help contribute to the quarter-cent sales tax.
And this might be a bit of a silly question, but does that sales tax also apply for like vintage stores and secondhand stores? I just wasn't sure.
Yes. So under state law, there's some exceptions to what can have sales tax added to it. So most groceries are excluded. Certain professional services like attorney fees, those kinds of things are excluded. But generally, if you're buying any type of goods, vintage or brand new, there is a sales tax added. And that is all determined by state statute and the state legislature. The city doesn't have any control over who applies sales tax to what.
Sure. Vintage and secondhand goods are always that category that trips me up because there's so many nuances around it. So I always like to ask just in case. But, with that basic information, you have officially gotten that voting done for the continuation of that sales tax. It passed, very luckily for all of us. So can you start off kind of comparing, since it's passed and you have it tucked in your cap to use, what your timeline looks like compared to what it could have looked like if that sales tax hadn't passed, and how, if it hadn't passed, it would have impacted your current projects or future projects within the department?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just first want to say we are so grateful to the voters for their support and trust in this initiative and in the work that Lincoln Transportation Utilities provides every day. This approval, in my mind, really does reflect the shared priority of transportation needs to be strong. It is the backbone of our community, and without it, our quality of life just isn't the same. So huge thank you to the community and everyone who voted for it. Because of their support and trust in it, we are able to continue at a very fast pace on improving streets. And we know there's a lot of work to do out there. So with this new quarter-cent sales tax, we have 8 years to continue to prove that this was a smart investment for the community. With Lincoln on the Move, we're able to do an average of about 11 projects every year because of this additional funding. Compare that, if Lincoln on the Move quarter-cent sales tax would not have passed, we would only be able to do 2, maybe 3 projects a year. So this allows us to do 5 times as many projects. And we know there's that many needs across the community. So we're excited to get to work. We're excited to start doing all of those projects over the next 8 years. And we'll really be able to make a difference with this additional funding.
And I want to highlight that number really quick that you gave us. 11 projects in a single year is impressive. From beginning to end and all of the hiccups in between, a single project is quite time costly, right? Can you kind of talk about how long a single project like that takes and how that compares to doing 11 of them in a year? Your department must be insanely busy.
We are, but it's work that we enjoy doing. But it does, there's a lot more work that goes into it than we might normally think. I'm not an engineer, so when I started in this position about 6 years ago, it was eye-opening because even though the street already exists and we're just rehabilitating it or doing a mill and overlay, there's a full year's worth of designing it because state standards or federal standards might have changed. So sometimes that means a street has to be widened just a little bit. Or maybe there's a new type of pavement that we're using, whether it's concrete or asphalt, and trying to figure out always what is the best material to use to last the longest and provide the best, highest quality repairs. So that takes about a year. And then construction most of the time is usually, for the most part, at one season. So if we think of a construction season being from April to October, usually, it depends on if we get lots of rain or lots of snow at any given time. But easy rehabilitation mill and overlays can usually be done in one construction season. There are much bigger projects if we think of West A, where it's not only a road, but it's a water main and a wastewater main, where those take a couple years of construction to get those all completed. But if you're thinking something like 9th Street rehabilitation, we were able to get that done in one construction season. So it really depends on the type of project, but at a minimum, it's a year design and a year of construction at the quickest for the most part.
You know, when we have cold weather snaps, our first thought is always, how is this affecting social services in the city? How is this affecting our folks who are struggling with housing in the city? And I feel like not many people think about how it impacts our construction teams. That sounds like a huge nuisance. Do you find that construction that starts in early springtime runs into that roadblock a lot?
Trying to manage the needs of the entire community is very hard because part of it is if we have a project near a school, we try not to do that while school is in session. So that means we can't really do a lot of work April and May. So our construction season is now shortened to June to August before school starts up again. Or if you think of Cornhusker, Nebraska football, and try to make sure we can't do it always. We know there's been a lot of construction over the last couple of years, but we try to minimize the impact knowing that we're going to have all those visitors coming in to those games. So we try to work around that. the weather, as you mentioned, is a huge impact. If it rains too much and the ground's too muddy that we can't put down concrete or asphalt or lay the pipes, or is it too cold and the ground's frozen and we can't do that, or there's too much snow. So really, it's a lot like farming in my mind, where the weather's got to be just right, and any extremes does impact timing and schedule.
I bet taking bets on whether it's going to have a second spring any year is a real betting pool in your department, isn't it?
It is. It does make it, challenging, and you never know. Well, this could be good. It could be bad. And it changes day to day, as you know, here in Nebraska.
Gotta love Midwest weather. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just, as we're thinking Midwest weather, one of the other things that many people don't think about, I hear often is people say, hey, I came from Florida and we don't have potholes, or I came from Minnesota and we don't have potholes. We are lucky in the Midwest, I guess, that we see extreme weather and temperatures fluctuate year round, where if you're in Florida, you stay warm. If you're in Minnesota, you stay frozen in the winter. And it's the freeze-thaw cycle here in the Midwest that really is hard on our assets, whether it's the ground, the freeze-thaw on pavement. If it's, it also impacts water mains and any issues that we might have with those. So the freeze-thaw cycles of the Midwest is harsh on all of our assets. And that's ultimately what produces the potholes between freezing, and then when it thaws, the water soaks into the cracks on the road. And then when it freezes, like ice does, it expands. So it breaks open those cracks wider. And we keep doing that for months on end. So you won't see the same challenges in Minneapolis or Saratoga, Florida, as you will here in Lincoln, Nebraska, or Iowa City, or Topeka, Kansas. So it's just a different challenges we have to work with here.
That's really interesting. Have you ever sat down with department heads from those other cities and kind of compared your cost of maintenance for our assets and been like, oh, well, obviously, in the Midwest, we see some significant temperature fluctuations, so we have a higher cost for maintenance. Is that a thing that you notice?
And that's something we haven't necessarily sat down and compared apples to apples. Down, if you live on the coast and stuff, they have different challenges like hurricanes that also damage stuff that we don't necessarily do, but we have tornadoes from time to time. So it's a little harder to compare apples to apples in different regions, but we do have a really strong partnership with our partners in Omaha and other regional cities, because learning from each other and learning what works, what doesn't work, what have they tried, we can avoid some of the mistakes they did. So we do try to keep those collaborative relationships to learn from one another.
Completely understandable. I'm going to knock on wood here really quick since it's tornado season. Don't want a repeat of last year. But, with this quarter-cent sales tax having passed again, folks are naturally curious about what they can expect coming up. You've got some projects that are currently underway. You are wrapping up, and some that I hear that are in the works. Can you tell us more about that, or is it still hush-hush?
No, absolutely. So we do know this season is lined up. We have 10 projects that are going on this year. A few of them will go into next year as well. And that's in all quadrants across the community. So if we're thinking in Northwest, we have Northwest 12th Street from West Adams to West Highland. We have 33rd and Fletcher from Superior to 27th Streets. If we're kind of going down south, we have 40th Street from A to O, Pine Lake Road, 14th to 32nd. We also have 14th Yankee Hill to Pine Lake. Looking out east, we have East Ridge neighborhood and a bunch of different areas on there. Lindcrest, East Ridge, Taylor Park, and a few others in that area are going to see improvements. And then in 2026, some that will be kicking off in spring of 26 or 70th from Pioneers to Van Dorn, 27th from Nebraska Parkway to South Street, 48th Normal to Cotner, and Vine Street, 66 to 70th. And those are just Lincoln on the Move ones. We have several other projects that are not Lincoln on the Move. We have 56th Street, Spruce to Van Dorn, that's taken place this summer, but that's a federal aid project. So we've got a lot of work going on. We don't have the lineup for beyond 26 with Lincoln on the Move because we weren't sure if it was going to pass. And so we will work closely with the Advisory Committee on Transportation in picking those future Lincoln on the Move projects for the rest of 26, 27, and beyond.
And this is, I'm going to try to figure out how to word this without it sounding really awkwardly, but do you, when you're looking at project management, are you trying to do projects, multiple projects that run north to south at the same time, and then projects that run south, east to west at the same time? Or are you trying to kind of have projects that are intersecting? I'm sorry, that was a very awkward gesture there, but I'm trying to make an intersecting gesture.
It all depends. I wouldn't say there's a specific formula or algorithm to it because there's a number of factors that we're looking at on project programming. Some of it is what other projects are in the area. I don't want to go in, redo a beautiful street, and then next year tear it up to replace a water main. So we try to coordinate with water, wastewater, other private utilities like LES or Black Hills. And so sometimes that dictates the schedule. If we say, okay, water is going to be replaced next year, so they're not ready to go yet. Let's hold the street project until next year to do the water main and that at the same time. The other one is we want to make sure as best as we can that we don't shut down all of the main arterials in one neighborhood. So we don't want to shut down 40th, 48th, and 56th all at the same time in the same area. That just makes it too hard for people to get around town. Sometimes it doesn't work because there's a lot of prep work that has to go on. Like last summer, if we think 56th Street, we needed LES to get in there to do their electric work so we could start construction this year. So sometimes we had 56th and we had 70th shut at the same time, not because that was something that we wanted, but just the timing wise, that was what worked for us and LES, and how do we get it all done as quickly as possible. So we try to minimize those closures that are right next to each other as best we can. We also try to, you can get construction fatigue. So if you just do all of your work in one area, they get really burned out. So you try to space them out as much as possible as well. So not necessarily a specific, yes, we try and do all of these at the exact same time. It's really just about trying to get in and out with the least amount of interruption for a community. And there's so much going on that some people are like, okay, I'm tired of all of the construction in this area. But if we hurry up and get it done, we won't have to come back for many years to disturb them again. So we appreciate everyone's patience and focusing on how beautiful and smooth the ride is going to be when it's done. Hopefully makes it all worth it.
I'm glad that you mentioned those other factors, like working with water utilities and kind of coordinating all of those efforts so that you're not having to go back. Besides water, are there other particular factors that go into choosing which projects get priority and which ones need to kind of get put off? I mean, you mentioned water utilities or pipe systems. Are there other factors besides that, though?
Yes, absolutely. So looking at everything that's going on, we also have data to back up our decisions. So every few years, we drive every street in the community to determine the pavement condition and how it has changed over the last 2 years since the last time we did that. That tells us we can see areas, and those photos often are like infrared, so we can see things that are not just seen with the eye, but a little deeper than that. And so that allows us to watch the areas. Oh, this one is deteriorating faster than we thought, or this one's holding up pretty well. And then that helps us determine which ones we need to tackle first. The other things that we look at are crash data. Are there different improvements that we need to do? Are there a rise or a trend in crashes or near misses? Or maybe we're seeing a change. A new school was built in this area, and now we're seeing a lot more pedestrians and children. So a lot of different factors and trends that we try to track. We meet on a regular basis with like Lincoln Public Schools to know what are they working on. So maybe we can be in an area at the same time, or maybe we need to expand services in a certain area based on growth. So we look at all of those different factors and trends, and that helps us determine which projects and in what order.
And then you mentioned earlier that, I'm not sure this is the proper way to say it, but the recipe, so to speak, for asphalt or concrete can change. Does that happen often? I think a lot of people think of that as being like, oh, we've been using asphalt for decades and it just is what it is. But
it changes ever so slightly. Sometimes they add new ingredients. Sometimes in the last several years, people are trying to do more sustainable or using recycled materials in certain mixtures. Sometimes it's just a better mixture of less water, more water, depending on the conditions. So it's definitely, there's a little bit of science and there's a little bit of art to it. But one of the recent innovations that has come out that we have started to use to help maintain streets longer is what we call pressure pave. And the first one that we did was 2 years ago, I believe, out in the Havelock area. And so we do a few of those, and that's fascinating. It's kind of like it's kind of a bad analogy, but a really thick lotion that we're putting on skin that we're really just pushing into the concrete surface or the pavement surface, and that hopefully will help sustain the life of that without having to tear it up and redo it. So there's always new innovations that we're trying to see if that helps extend the life of the streets. So we save money, we maintain it longer, and we don't have to come in with more invasive projects like completely tearing it out.
we're conditioning our streets.
Exactly. Just like your skin, we're conditioning the streets.
It's fascinating. It's not something I mean, I'm sure if I sat down and thought about it, I would get there eventually, but it's not something I would have thought about naturally without this conversation.
Yeah, and most people don't sit there and just stare at the street and think, I wonder what goes into it. So it is fascinating when you start to really think about what goes into it.
Yeah, there's so many details that you have to oversee in the Lincoln Transportation and Utilities Department, and you guys are taking care of all of Lincoln. So now looking at all of my papers in front of me and all of my notes, I think I got through all of the questions that I managed to scribble down. But I always like to ask folks before we head out, do you have anything you'd like to add? Anything you'd like to tell folks that you wish they knew about the Lincoln on the Move project or about your department?
What I would really encourage people to do is to check out, we have what we call a projects page, and it has all of the projects going back to 2020, which is when we started this. And it lays out those that are planned. So that means they're in design. We're getting ready for those that are under construction, and then those that have been completed in the years. So a lot of people are like, hey, when is this street going to be done? I always look to the project page and say, hey, look, it's on our project page and it's going to happen this year or in 2026. So encourage people to check out. You can go to lincoln.ne.gov and in the search bar, just type in projects and the link to the page will pop right up. And like I said, it's a wealth of information. It has the project schedule. It has the project manager contact information there, or the contractor's information there. it has all of the budget information. If you want to know, is this paid with Lincoln on the Move quarter-cent sales tax, or is it federally funded? That information's all on there as well. And then you can also see the map where it shows across town. You can see how much work is really getting done. And so it's just exciting because it's not just streets on the project page, it's all of L2's projects: water, wastewater, transit, streets. So you can see how much work really is going on across the community.
It's a useful page. I check it out quite a lot. I'm spoiled by it, so.
Yeah, I use it probably daily. I know most of my team, because it is such a helpful website and it's interactive. You can get as much information as you want, and we keep it up to date. So very excited to have that, just to really keep people in the know and to make sure they know where their money is being invested.
And for folks who haven't looked at that page before, we're going to go ahead and drop a link in both the transcript on the YouTube and onto our social media page, so you can go check that out if you haven't before. But of course, I just want to thank you again, Ms. Elliott, for joining us today to talk more about the Lincoln on the Move project and that quarter-cent sales tax.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you again to all of the voters for supporting this effort to improve our streets, and look forward to all of the construction coming our way.
Hi folks, my name is Rebecca Ford, KZUM's news intern, and this will be my last episode with KZUM as my internship wraps up. I can't thank the wonderful people here working behind the scenes enough for all of their patience, kindness, support, and guidance that they've offered me over the course of my internship. It's been such a privilege to produce these shows, and it's been such a wonderful opportunity to learn more about the Lincoln community. I hope you all have learned just as much as I have. Thank you all for listening.
We are fast approaching the end of the hour, so here are your reminders for today. The KZUM Newsroom is always open to hearing about any questions, concerns, suggestions, or even any story ideas that you might want to share with us. All you have to do is give us a call at 402-474-5086, extension line 6. If you give us a call and we aren't available, don't forget to leave a voicemail. Or, if you aren't much of a phone person, you can also find our social media handles and more newsroom information at kzum.org under that About tab. Speaking of our website, if you happen to miss a show, you can always head to the KZUM News tab, where we archive all of our shows and include a transcript with links to that day's content. And lastly, I just want to give a shout out to Jack Rodenberg of the Rodenberg Music Experience. He put together all of the amazing original music that our news program uses. So once again, thank you, Jack. That wraps up our reminders for now. As you head out into the world, I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you for listening, and we hope you'll join us next time. You just finished listening to KZUM News, an original production of KZUM Radio that airs every Saturday at 11 a.m. Coming up next is Beta Radio, so stay tuned.